So as I said earlier, there are four different approaches to job analysis. We're going to start with the first one, which is functional job analysis. So what this is a very quantitative approach to analyzing jobs. There is a list of functions or work activities that have already been compiled that can make up any job. So this list basically implies that every job deals with data, people, and things. You don't need to know this in huge amounts of detail, but just bear with me here. Here's an example. Data, people, things. There are lots of different things you can do with data. You can compare it, you can copy it, you can compute it, compile it, analyze, coordinate, synthesize. With regards to people, maybe you just take instructions, you serve people, you persuade, you supervise, you instruct, you mentor. In terms of things, maybe you handle them, you tend them, you manipulate them, you precision work them, etc. So the idea in functional job analysis is that we're able to very objectively and numerically and quantitatively determine what you do with each of these things. So for example, if you just compare data or copy it, that's going to be at a different level to somebody who coordinates it and analyzes it. If you take instructions from somebody, you are not supervising. So it's just to really kind of look at the different levels of duties and able to apply a framework to them. So again, you don't need to know this in huge amounts of detail just to understand what it is. Another approach is a position analysis questionnaire, PAQ. This is a registered trademark, position analysis questionnaire. It is a questionnaire that covers 194 different tasks on a 5-point scale, and it determines the degree to which tasks are involved in a particular job. Okay, so again, maybe 20 years ago this was a questionnaire, maybe 30 years ago. Now it's definitely an online tool. Yeah. So for example, again, you don't need to know this in detail, it's just for your information. So for an example, you'll see different, I guess, levels, okay? And then you will look at how often people do it. So let's say people deal with written materials a lot. They may be a level 1 compared to quantitative materials or pictorial materials, visual displays, measuring devices. So depending on the different things that they do and the level and how often, you're able to kind of get, again, a very objective idea of how to figure out what this job is about, okay? This starts to get a little less scientific and is used a lot more because obviously functional job analysis and position analysis questionnaire can involve some costs. So another approach to job analysis is the critical incident method, and just as it suggests, we're trying to find out what are the critical incidents in a job. So here we look at the tasks that are identified as critical. So the job analyst ends up writing 5 to 10 important task statements for each job, which becomes the basis of the job. Another approach is the task inventory analysis, where we're trying to identify all the tasks that people do. Now, a task would be the smallest unit that we look at. Again, this is going to take a lot of time to actually speak to people and find out what is every task that they do, but that's a way of building a job description. And then finally, the last one that a lot more organizations are using is special software. A lot of HRIS systems have these functions that you can analyze jobs and write job descriptions based on whatever the software can do. So it may give you, similar to the functional job analysis, different types of words that you can use. Do you supervise people? Do you liaise with people? Do you serve people, etc.? Yeah. But again, the idea is to make it very objective using the software as your basic framework. Okay, so again, that was just different ways of how job analysis can happen, but the main idea in job analysis is that I'm trying to gather as much information from as many different people in an objective way to be able to write the job description. The other thing I want to spend a minute on is job evaluation, because we often hear the terms job analysis and job evaluation together. Job evaluation is not job analysis. It's a completely different function. So just as the word suggests, evaluation comes from the word value. Okay? So what is job evaluation? It is again a process of systematically determining a relative internal value of a job in an organization. So here I'm looking at the value of a job within an organization. I'm not looking at the person who's doing the job, I'm looking at the job itself. So what do I mean by value? I'm trying to determine the worth of one job in relation to that of another job, so that we can actually ensure that our compensation or our salary structures are fair and equitable. So how do I determine the different levels of wages? How do I determine which job falls into which level or which pay grade? This is all through a job evaluation exercise. So how do I determine that a clerk 1 should be paid less than a clerk 2 or whatever I use? It's based on a job evaluation, which of course is based on a job analysis, because if you do not have properly written job descriptions, you can't begin to evaluate the worth of one job over the other. So that's just very clear how job analysis differs from job evaluation. Right, so let's jump into the most exciting part here, job descriptions. Hopefully you do have one. Your individual assignment, the first one, is all about you doing a job description analysis. So hopefully you have them in front of you, or at least, if not, listen to this again when you do, okay? So how does this work? We all know this first part here. I'm trying to find out as much information from questionnaires and observations from as many different people. When I do kind of get some consensus, no, actually before I get consensus, what I usually do is I write a draft job description, and then I go back to everybody and ask them their opinions before I can write a final. Now this stage here can take a long time, because it can take a long time. We may reach draft 6 or 7 before we get the final draft. But of course, it's important to get all the consensus and buy-in before we produce the final job description. So what we have here are what is deemed as the key elements of a job description, and we'll break this down further. So the first one is a job title. You've got to have a job title. There's just no, you've just got to. It adds value to the job. It should be clear as to what people do. It should give like a summary just by hearing the job title. So it tends to indicate what kind of job you do, or the job duties, and maybe even the level that you're at. So if you hear somebody is a supervisor or they're an officer, it might give a different vibe to if they're an assistant or a manager. The job identification section, which is what sort of makes, how do you identify the job as it relates to other jobs? The essential functions of a job, or the duties, which are really all about the responsibilities of the job and the results to be accomplished. And then finally, the job specification, or the person specification, the skills needed. So very broadly, these are the 4 areas: job title, job identification section, the essential functions, and the person specification. So let's break this down, okay? Job descriptions simply provide status to the employee. It gives the job some worth. You can't just have somebody called an employee. They need to have a job title. It indicates what types of duties that person does, and it indicates the relative level occupied by that job holder. Okay, just so the title in itself can give some indication of where the job is. So job titles should really be very reflective of what people do. We have some strange titles out there. I don't know if sometimes we're going a little overboard and being a little politically correct. I know there's a switch from maybe calling people supervisors to calling them team leaders. Do we really want to call the janitor sanitation engineer? Are we being a bit facetious in doing that? But a job title should really just accurately reflect what the person is doing in a way that is respectful and in keeping with the job. The job identification section, well, all of these things could be found there, okay? Where the job is located. Now that's an important one, because I might be an admin assistant in marketing, or I might be an admin assistant to the CEO's office. My job may vary a little bit because of that. So which department the job is located in. Most critically, who does that job holder report to? It is very important that we get the reporting relationship written down on a job description so that there's no ambiguity about who the person reports to. It's very advisable to state the date the job description was last revised. So if I see it was 1996, well, I'm pretty sure we're going to be running into some problems. If the organization says does have a payroll or a code number for the job, then that can go here. The number of employees actually performing the job is pretty important. Sorry, I thought I'd stopped it. So for example, if I'm the only admin assistant in a department, that might be a different kind of scenario to if I was one of 5. Yeah. The number of employees in the entire department, again, may speak to what I'm doing and may be of relevance. And then I should have a statement of the job. So what do I mean by statement of the job? I should have a couple of lines that just summarize exactly what the job is about. So this is the second important section, the job identification section. As much of this as relevant or as possible should be included here. Again, major part, the job duties, the essential functions section, where I actually list all the statements of the job as it relates to duties, tasks, responsibilities, my TDRs. So they should be arranged in order of importance that indicate the weight or value of each duty. And how do I work that out? By how much time I spend on it. So let's say I'm an admin assistant and the majority of my work is filing. Then that needs to be put at the top of the order. If I spend 40% of my time filing and I do more filing than anything else, then the accurate filing of documents should be my very first job duty. Okay, so they should be in order with the ones you do the least in terms of time towards the end. They should all stress the responsibilities of the duties, as well as what results should be accomplished, as well as we should actually indicate the tools and equipment that the employee may use to perform the job, because this may help us actually work out some of the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities in the person spec. So it's important that our statements are by weight or by value of how important they are to the overall job, the responsibilities and results, and of course the tools and equipment. And then we have the person specification or the job specification section, which is what looks at the KSAs. So this is all the qualifications the individual must possess in order to perform the TDRs, the tasks, duties, and responsibilities. So it may look at the education or experience, if they need to have specialized training, any personal traits or abilities, their interpersonal skills, whatever specific behaviors. This is the chance to, based on your job description, what do you actually need this person to have to be able to perform that job? And also here, we should talk about the physical demands of the job. If the job requires you to stand all day or to lift heavy equipment, then we better put them in this section so that it's clearly stating that this is what we would need you to do. This is this ability you need to have to be able to do the TDRs. So what are a few problems with job descriptions? So be aware of this. If they're poorly written, they provide very little guidance to the job holder. If they're not up to date, then again, they're not going to really be very important because a lot of things may be obsolete, or there are a lot of things that you're doing that may not be on your job description. How are you even going to begin to appraise somebody if their job description is not complete, which can get straight into some industrial relations issues when we're trying to appraise people on a document that's incomplete. They can also limit the scope of activities. So I know all of us hate that term at the end, any other duties as required, but that's a reality of life, okay? You don't want to identify every single thing in the job description because then you don't leave any flexibility. And sometimes you do need people to do things that perhaps you haven't considered. The issue, however, comes up when any other duty as required is all you seem to be doing. And in that case, you need to go back to the job analysis stage, and all those things that you seem to spend your time doing need to be written into your job description, of course, with a proper time management, etc. point of view to ensure you can do everything. Okay, so see, these are just a few problems that come up with job descriptions. So I have a few more. I don't like to go into 3 presentations, but I'm just going to cover the last few in part C, and I promise to ease you all up next week in terms of, oh gosh, so much to listen to.